Anthony Rose is widely recognized as the man who built the BBC iPlayer, a serial entrepreneur deeply embedded in the startup landscape. Anthony is the co-founder and the CEO of SeedLegals, the go-to platform for founders needing to navigate the complex legal necessities of their startup journey. As an engineer at heart, Anthony's venture always starts with an innate drive to solve problems and to make things better, easier, more efficient, and more intuitive to use. In the tech space, where it's easy to lose sight of the real problem behind projects, Anthony is one of few entrepreneurs who truly understand the relationship between a founder's idea and the user's problem, crafting his products with exceptional detail. In the following conversation, I asked Anthony about his very first experiences with product building and problem solving. We talk about the fun projects he undertook with his Alfa Romeo during his university days, his early ventures into 3D graphics, BBC iPlayer, social TV and social networks before his current venture, SeedLegals. A truly inspiring founder, Anthony discusses the reality of being a serial entrepreneur, the instinct to spot problems, the almost second-nature drive to solve them, the hard work involved, the agility required in product building, and of course, the enjoyment of the experiences along the way.
All right, Anthony, let's start from the early days, shall we? You are a serial entrepreneur. You build multiple ventures ranging from 3D graphics to P2P music to social TV, social platform, and most recently, the legal tech. But I'd like to go back. You, at the age of 14, put up a home-based 6800 computer. It seems that drive to build a product started very early. So can you tell me what intrigued you at such an early age to build stuff?
Great question. And, the things you mentioned, 3D graphics and peer-to-peer music and legal tech, are all very different. So, it's a bit of a random walk. What's in common? And I think, for any founder, to try and identify what are the things that you love doing. And for me, it's building things and turning an idea into something. And that's the bit that I really love. Now, other people love the team management, or some people love making money, or, changing the world. For me, I think it's just, I love building stuff. And it's not to say it doesn't matter what it is, but I saw something really interesting, which is, as a founder, you must really love what you're doing. But I think you fall in love with it. You don't just love it at the beginning. So, with SeedLegals and legal tech, I didn't wake up one day and go, I love legals. But what happens is you have a problem to solve, and then you find customers loving what you do, and you love working with them, and then you fall in love with it. But going back to your question, when I was a kid, I was doing electronics at a really early age, and I loved building things, and I'd sit with circuit boards and things like that and soldering iron. And I was doing all of this as a hobby. I was still at school. And actually one day I'd made a circuit board for a plug-in board for an Apple II computer. And I took it to my local Apple computer store where there was an American entrepreneur running it. And he said, that's great. We'll take 20 of them. And I went, I'm sorry, this is my hobby. What am I? Anyway, I then suddenly went, wait a second, I can build these things to sell, and started my own business. And this was in the days before VC funding and angel investors and SEIS. There was no such thing as investment. You had to borrow money from the bank to build something. And if you didn't pay it back, then you weren't going to make any more. So I got into the super one-person company, having to build things, and of course it had to be profitable or there was no business. And that then morphed step by step over the years into 3D graphics, and then music, and then video with BBC iPlayer, and now legals at SeedLegals. But in all cases, when I wake up in the morning, I love to go, what's this problem to solve? How can we solve it in a way that people will love it, and use that product and service?
That's fascinating. So what I'm hearing is there's a strong sense of curiosity from early childhood. I just want to go to the side track a little bit because I'm a mother myself. I have a 7-year-old child, and the child curiosity is absolutely beautiful. And it seems that when they have that inquisitive mind, when they answer the question and build stuff, the best thing you could do is just to let them go for it, and they will fall in love with it, isn't it? That seems to be very much your story, that you fall in love with building something and solve a problem.
I think so. I don't have kids, but I was talking to somebody over the weekend who is a teacher, remedial teacher for kids, and she was saying a problem with a lot of kids these days is they don't do physical things like Lego or Meccano sets, and they spend far too much on screen time. And I recall that, as a kid, my father bought me a Meccano set when I was like super young, and relatives came by and said, "Oh my God, he's going to swallow the screws, and it will, injure people, and there's screws and stuff all over the house." But I think that was kind of instrumental. It's that, having an idea of what you're going to make with it, and then assembling things and then disassembling them. And so if it is the case that kids are spending too much time just consuming stuff from YouTube or whatever on an iPad, maybe there is a push for parents to go back to more physical things. I'm not a parent, so I'm in no way an expert, but I do think that that sort of parental push and facilitation with creativity and building things has led to me wanting to do more of that.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing that experience. So I just want to move on a little bit. You certainly seems to have carried this level of curiosity and wanting to do things, test things, build things all the way into university days. And the next fun project seems to be obtaining a license to officially exceed the national speed limit to work on your Alfa Romeo project. That sounds a lot of fun, and certainly would love to hear more about that.
Right. So, back in my student days, I was at university. I got myself an Alpha GTV 2000, for those who remember them, and would drive at moderately high speed around Cape Town. I was living in South Africa at the time, and I wanted my Alpha to go faster. And so, being an electronics guy, I'd hooked up some system of magnets in the wheel that I could record the speed very accurately. And then I wrote a computer program on my Apple that I could drive it to speed and then put it in neutral. And as it coasted down, I could then work out what part of the drag came from air resistance as opposed to rolling resistance. And then I had this idea: what if I wrote to the government and said that if I applied this work more generally, then it would save the country so much on fuel because cars would be more efficient. And in order to test this, I would need a license to exceed the speed limit. And I was kind of a long-haired student at the time, so I thought the chance of this working is zero. But I wrote to the Minister of Energy, and nothing happened for quite some months. And then one day, I got this official government stationery with the letter signed by the energy minister with the license, with the okay to exceed the speed limit. The condition is the car had to have suitable, messaging on it. So I went off and had a big sticker made saying "government license to exceed speed limit," and I stuck this on the front of the back of my Alpha and proceeded to drive around town. And occasionally I'd get pulled over by the police who'd point to this and go, "You've got to remove this sticker. You can't go around with a sign like that." And then I'd open the glove box and take out this letter, and they would look at the letter and look at the sort of long-haired student. And there was this look of life is so unfair in their eyes. And then I went, "Okay, so have a good day." And so that was a lot of fun. But that was an early lesson in, try and ask for things. Just because something isn't generally the way to go, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. And, be adventurous, give it a go. If all else fails, they were going to go no or not right back. So it was, and to this day, it's all about taking little bets and so on. Some of them you don't want to take bets that are going to like kill you, but you're going to take bets that if they pay off are great.
So you were, I'm just trying to picture this. You were driving Alpha with the stickers and driving around the town. And was that a process you were going through a few weeks, or did you have a time limit how long you were allowed to do that?
It was like probably for a year I had it. I think
Oh,
it was I don't know if it came out for a time box, but it was like a year, and then I was kind of like over it after that. And but I'd had my fun, and it was great. And I did some tests to actually make the car go faster, and then I blew out the engine by putting nitrous oxide in it. So that went badly, and the engine blew up quite spectacularly. But that's another story.
but the minister in the end, did they ask for the result of the experiment to see
No.
was there some sort of formula that we can actually?
There wasn't.
So if that's the case, can I say you love sports car then?
Well, see, as a kid, I did, and now I don't have a car. And I think what I've realized is, as a kid, a car means freedom. You can leave home and go out and about. And I live in central London, and running to me is freedom. And so when I go along the embankment to our office, I see fancy sports cars, and I can run faster than them than they're going in central London. So these days, actually, it's completely the opposite. I really love not having a car, and I really love just running. So if there's an event in Shoreditch, I mean, the joys of London, if you're in central London, is things are quite close. And if you want to, if you think you're running late, you should take a cab. That's probably the bad thing to do, because you're going to be much slower than just taking the tube or running.
I just want to throw out a really fun question to you, an entirely hypothetical question. That is, if I were going to give you 3 options and you only have to make one choice to take a car on a holiday drive, let's say in North Italy, you've got a choice of Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale, perhaps Aston Martin DB12. The third one, what could that be? That could be, let's say, Maserati MC20. You only got one choice. Which car would you take it?
I'll probably take the Aston, being the British one. But I don't know, it's in Italy, but I'll probably take the Aston. So because I have always they look so beautiful, and I've never gotten to drive one, and so I would take that opportunity.
Good choice. I would go for the same. Moving on to your next venture, your first proper venture, if I may say so, your 3D graphics that IPO'd in 1994, which later eventually merged with the music file sharing company called Kazaa. I wonder if you could say a few words about that project, but also, most importantly, how did that experience later on shape your mindset when you went on to build so many other ventures?
So it's a great question. So there I was living in South Africa. It was time to leave South Africa when I looked up on the hill, which was where Cape Town University was. I was at university at the time, and there would be tear gas smoke, another riot. And I thought, today I won't go to university. But eventually it came time to leave South Africa, and we all moved to Australia. And in Australia, I set up my electronics business again. But I'd never found the right business partner to grow the company. It was just a one-person company and was doing very nicely, but it's like it needed to grow. And then the people who ran Sega Australia, that's the big Japanese games company that had the Australian franchise, the people who ran it didn't want to just sell other people's games. They wanted to come up with something new. And a friend of a friend connected us, and I went, me, small company, big company, hardware, software, whatever, it sounds really interesting. And so the idea was to use 3D technology, create a real-time 3D engine to create interactive real-time 3D movies. And this was in the days of, dial-up modems. The internet was far too slow to do streaming video. So if you wanted to have animation on the internet, then it would have to be real-time 3D video. And so I was CTO at the company. I wasn't the founder, but was CTO. So that was, I guess, a step from one-person company to being the tech person in a larger company, and we filed a whole lot of patents and we built a lot of really cool technology. And then what happened is the big internet bust came in the year 2000, and the companies who we'd licensed our technology to use on their websites to create these nice interactive movies, they mostly went out of business. So we had to reinvent what we were doing to stay in business ourselves. And we thought we'll use our technology to do advertising on the internet. So instead of just a banner ad, the days of banner ads, it could be an interactive ad. And for that to happen, our plugin needed to be installed on lots more computers. So we were in a race with Adobe Shockwave to get their plugin in ours. And so we partnered with the companies that had the fastest downloads on the internet, which is from download.com, and it was the music file sharing. So we partnered with those companies so that when you install their product, we install our software as well. And on a peak week, I think we got like 16 million installs. And for me, that was also the drug of waking up in the morning and seeing literally millions of people using your products. And that then led to an obsession with making it work, because they're like, if it worked 99% of the time, that's 1% didn't work. If there are a million people using it, that's like 10,000 people who are having a bad experience. So that's definitely going to get you focused on making it work perfectly. And so one day that would come back afterwards when I was heading up iPlayer with the obsession to make sure it works perfectly for everybody. And so our platform, instead of getting used for real-time 3D graphics, was now getting used for 3D advertising. And then that led to working closely with Kazaa, the music file sharing applications. And then we thought, wait a second, instead of people just downloading these songs which they had gotten from ripping CDs or whatever, could we work with the music labels to create a licensed music store? This was really in the days before iTunes. And then we went to visit the music stores to license the catalog, and then that morphed into the music distribution as part of the file sharing applications.
That sounds right up the stream. Sort of, you said that was the days when there was dialing broadband. So there must be awfully a lot of technical questions to get around to deliver whatever you just described there.
That's right. And I think that was interesting because I'm kind of like a tech guy and I love solving technical problems. So, how you can make the graphics more compressed without it looking bad, or how you can have the system try and predict to download things up front. So when you get to that point in the movie or the animation, it's going to not have to buffer and so on. And how it can install even on different computers. And computers were obviously much more basic then. So there are lots of technical problems to solve. And I think, by the way, more generally for founders, many founders are technical founders, and they love solving technical problems, but that's quite different to solving a problem that the user has. And for me, that epiphany came at BBC iPlayer days. We're skipping ahead. I was living in Australia, got asked by the BBC to head up iPlayer. I moved to London. And in the early days of iPlayer, the problems to solve were all technical problems. The internet was going to fall over, the compression of the graphics to work, delivered to your computer, the timing to get the show onto iPlayer quickly ahead of it being on TV, the encoding and the getting it from the TV. There are lots of technical problems to solve, which I really love doing. So the early days of many things are solving technical problems. But one day, when the BBC commissioned some survey, one of the things was now meeting users to see how they use iPlayer. And I was quite amazed to see that the people were asking for things like, can you use the controls with one hand because I like to eat lunch and have a sandwich and watch iPlayer EastEnders while having a sandwich. So it needs to remember where I got to in the program from last night, so I can, just pick up immediately. And I probably watched at home, but now I'm at work, so it needs to remember across devices. And what happens is you realize that the problems you think were important, the graphics compression, are actually now taken as read and sorted, and you have to deal with a completely different one, which might come from an audience sector that's very different to you. I would never have thought I'm watching television while eating lunch. It's like I'm doing emails or go out in the sun or something. So you then realize you have to actually go and talk to customers, your users, to see what the problems that they're really looking to solve. And if you don't reinvent yourself to do that, you keep trying to solve technical problems and then wonder why no one's using your product, because they didn't need a technical problem. They needed some other problem sorted that, for their lifestyle.
So that lead on to my next question. During your BBC iPlayer days, like you said, of course, you flew over from Australia to the UK to head up the development. And I think many people know, which earned you the reputation who saved the BBC. And you talked about the importance to solve problems for the users. And the words out there is that you run the team in the BBC like a startup. So I just wondering, what was that like? How did you manage that? And when you talk about getting the user feedback, was that level of agility and a direct conversation, a quick decision making becomes very important when you build a product like that?
Okay, great question. And to put it in a way that might be helpful for anyone watching or listening to this, whether they're in a big company or in a small company. So small startups have got an advantage. You can make decisions, hopefully very efficiently. If it's a very small startup, it might be just you and a few colleagues. You can make decisions on a dime, but you've got no resource, you've got no audience, you've got no money. So life is not perfect, but decision making is easy. When you're in a large company, it's the opposite. There's tons of resource, tons of money, lots of developers, but decision making is really, really difficult. You have to get sign off from lots of people. There are naysayers, there are internal politics. People have got different views of what they want and not. So the BBC was my first foray into a large organization. And so, certain things that needed to be done. And then everyone had different views, and it was really hard to know which things we could just make decisions on and which ones we couldn't. So the concept I came up with was the sand pit or sandbox. And basically, I explained to my team, for certain things, if it's in our sand pit, we don't need to ask anyone else for permission. We just do it ourselves. And if it's outside the sandbox, then we have to ask other people. So, for example, if it's a technical question or a usability thing, we should just go off and make the decision ourselves. And then our goal is to structure things so that we have to ask the fewest people possible for permission. We just go off and do it. But for certain things that might require regulatory approval or content rights or other things, we can't just make up our mind. The BBC, iPlayer was limited to 7 days. I couldn't just go, let's make it 30 days because I feel like it. It was there because the government permissions had only allowed 7 days. So once we'd created this concept of it's inside the sandpit or outside the sandpit, suddenly the decision making was remarkably freed up. And that was, to me, about creating the startup inside the large company. So if you're working in a large company and you're stuck trying to navigate the complexities, try to create this concept of a sandbox and then work with your colleagues to go, this class of decisions, they might be below a certain budget level, or technical things that other people aren't going to care about, or maybe it's limited to your product area. You're just going to own that right yourself and make these, and make sure you don't start asking other people, because as soon as you ask them, you'll get their view. So one of the pacts I came with my team is, I said, team, the things in our sandpit, you are empowered to do it yourself. And also, you're banned from asking anyone outside of our team. But for things that are outside the sandpit, you're banned from doing it, and you have to ask me. And then I'm going to go off and do a deal, so to speak, to find out what we can do and what we reasonably can't do. And that worked really well. It meant that, the things that were in our area, we just get on with doing way more efficiently. And of course, we didn't do anything to like rock the boat or cause the police to arrive and take us away for contravening some parliament rule or something like that.
I suppose in a way that way of doing things also nurtured the thinking about innovation, isn't it? Because the moment when you have to think about organization rules, it suddenly becomes sort of a straitjacket for whatever you're building. But when you have a free mind and experiment and speak to the users and build whatever the product and service, innovation seems to be the driving force to propel the development forward.
Yeah, I think that, I don't think you wake up in the morning and go, today I want to innovate. I think sometimes you might have an idea for something that doesn't exist. But I think for the most part, most companies develop things in response to a user need. Somebody sees that people are doing things in a way that could be improved. Maybe no one's thought about it as really a problem before until somebody goes, they're filling in these forms or having to call a lawyer. It's insane. Why do I have to call a lawyer? And then they call the other party's lawyers and they explain it in gobbledygook. And then, I'm paying people by the hour. That's what computers are for. So hence, SeedLegals. So when you start, when you think about somebody is solving problems every day, but doing it inefficiently, you've got a new way of doing it. And then when you go and canvas and ask people for ideas and feedback, of course, a lot of people will tell you why what you're proposing is not possible. Then they'll give you all the reasons to justify the way the world worked before. And now, of course, your challenge is if you completely ignore all the feedback people are giving you, you might go off and build something that actually nobody wants because people are giving you really great feedback. You'd be an idiot to ignore it. On the flip side, if you proceed to listen to every naysayer who tells you why something won't work, you'll just never get on with doing something new. So the trick is to find to try and understand the reasons why somebody's saying that something isn't possible, and also to see their real desire for something new. Because you might have what I call a vanity project. You think it's a good idea and you say, wouldn't it be awesome if you could have this thing? And people go, yeah, that sounds great. But they were never really looking for that, and they'd never really changed their behaviors. So trying to use user feedback to see which things to develop if you want to start your own business as a founder is really vital before you start. Otherwise, you'll spend years building something and then wake up in a cold sweat every night because no one is buying it or no one's using it.
So it's very important to have a concept and build a prototype or something and verify that idea with your users. So moving on to your next venture, you went on to build a social TV called ZBox. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Right. And that gained you, over 4 million active users within a few years before it was acquired by Coty. So that must be incredible sort of rapid development within short space of time. You mentioned earlier about watching millions of downloads. This time you've got millions of users. How was it just watching the things you build from scratch, from a concept, and then suddenly within a few years, you have all those millions of users using it?
Yes, of course, there's lots of hard work en route, but the idea broadly, I think, was that when BBC had the idea for iPlayer, it was essentially taking the programs that were on telly last night and letting you watch them on whatever device you wanted, whenever you wanted, today. But it was the same programming that was on telly that you can now watch elsewhere. So the content really needs to evolve as well. You've got interactivity, people can talk to each other. Why is everyone watching the same David Attenborough program, but you can't interact with each other? You can't get information about it. So we had this concept to make TV into a social proposition. You might have Twitter next to you while you're watching TV, but what if your app would know which program you're watching by using audio recognition, and would know when there's an ad break, and it could remote control your TV and jump channels to find the programs you wanted. And when you're watching football, you've got the live commentaries and other points of view and so on. So all of this could actually be quite reinvented. And that was our proposition with ZBox, to change that. And I mean, some of it worked really well. But, to this day, TV broadcasters essentially create exactly the same programs today than they're made years ago. The same things to beam out to lots of people. And I think this, just separately to my own companies, I think this is a huge squandered opportunity for broadcasters, because when back in my iPlayer days in like 2007 to 2010, there wasn't really Facebook video, and YouTube was much earlier, and there was no Twitch, and there was definitely no TikTok. And broadcasters had the opportunity to own all of those spaces, and instead they went, no, it's just kids on skateboards, and the video quality is rubbish, and it's the internet, it's going to buffer. But people don't care about any of that. The fact that you can use your phone and create a video and share it with people, trumps watching something with flying pigeons in the Amazon or something made 2 years ago and then beautifully, lovingly filmed and put together. It's not to say there's nothing. The TV, high quality TV program is excellent, but it's not the only thing that people want. And so I think broadcasters are ultimately going to, be facing oblivion or just become content creators because they've failed to take the next step. It's not just about the digital distribution, it's about reinventing the way that you're creating content. So anyway, that was, since the broadcasters weren't doing it, the hypothesis was, well, I'm not going to create content. I don't have billions of dollars for creating content, but can I take existing content and then intermix it with social and augmented content and things like that? And so that was the hypothesis. So in the event, we ended up building something that actually engaged very well with brands, and ultimately we sold the business to a brand to use that around their brands and building and so on.
That's interesting. Before I move on, and I think you were incredibly early in that line of thinking. Of course, these days with the algorithms and, of course, the massive takeoff of the independent media, it seems to take on that line of thinking that is, in the old days, the legacy media, like you said, it was about sort of creating sleek news or programs or documentary. There's still a huge place for that, but there seems to be a missing social aspect of tying people together, because there are so many cultures and subcultures that different demographics, people could just do it on their phone and put it out there on whatever the media, and that seems to be gelling people together as more and more kids and a younger generation spend their time online. So you're incredibly early in that line of thinking. Moving on to your next venture, that's 2015, you build a social network called Six Tribes. Later on, it was acquired by Jeremy Clarkson, Philip Hammond, and James May. Now operate under the brand name of Drive Tribe, if I'm correct. The company, after it was sold, attracted 6.5 million investment from 21st Century Fox. But I remember that was the time when Top Gear was very much the anticipated program for many British households, and up until this day, the very mysterious test driver Stig remains intriguing all the fans. What was that project about? It sounds a lot of fun. Was that closer to your heart?
Yeah, well, after ZBox, I thought actually many of the things you do as a founder, I think, seem you'd like it to be a set of strategic decisions, but often it's just random luck. You meet a co-founder or you meet somebody who discovers something that you feel like doing, and one thing morphs into another. So, again, if you look at over the things I've done, there was, 3D graphics and then music and then video and then social and now legal. So, after I'd moved on and sold Cbox, I was thinking what to do. And I probably wasn't really done with the social thing and but done with the TV thing. And so I had the concept that, Twitter, everyone knows Twitter, it's pretty toxic. Why is it toxic? It's because, the concept is you're following people and people have got thoughts and different things, and you get this feed of all sorts of things mixed together. What if you could have a different type of feed around tribes of people that you like and identify within topics? So that was the concept of Six Tribes. So you might want to join different groups and, essentially have different topics, and then by being part of a group, you generally have better conversations. And if you weren't, then you'd be ousted from the group. And so these were the concepts of tribes. And the tribes that took off some of the most were car-related tribes. You'd see some cool car and you'd take a photo of it and you get lots of adores and likes and so on from people into the same thing. So many, many different tribes, but the car one was one of the most popular. And then the Top Gear folks started and moved on to joined Amazon. We're creating a new show for Amazon. They wanted to have a social app for that. Instead of starting from scratch, actually, there was an app already with tribes and with cars and so on. And so that became an opportune place to, sell that, exit, and then, go to start something new afterwards.
And that's obviously lead on to your present venture, SeedLegals, that became a focus for you in 2016. At that point, what was the problem you were trying to solve? And you've obviously already built many ventures and exited a few. And at that point, what brought you to think, right, I'm going to work on SeedLegals now?
Right. Well, I mean, where did legals come from and all this media and so on? Well, actually, it was at a birthday party held by one of my investors from previous startups. And at this party, I met this guy, Laurent Lafitte, my co-founder at SeedLegals, and he's an ex-VC and serial angel investor. And he was saying, those lawyers, they charge a fortune, they make mistakes, they take forever. And as an investor, every time he does an investment, it's the same slow, expensive process of going to a lawyer to create the documents. And actually, all the legal documents for funding rounds are actually identical. There's an industry standard on it. It's called the BVCA, British Venture Capital Association. They standardize. But nonetheless, lawyers would charge tens of thousands of pounds for doing the same thing again and again. There had to be a better way. So he was very passionate about this, and he began working on it. And he was looking for a co-founder, technical person to help turn it into something. And having been through the legals of exits and done a few investments myself, I thought this is actually quite an interesting problem to solve. And so we began working on doing exactly this. And clearly it was a problem that lots and lots of people were looking for a better solution for, because as of today, we're about 160 people, and so like a third of all early stage fundraising investments in the UK now go through SeedLegals, and a good fraction of all startups are on our platform. So it's really transformed the way a founder, someone wanting to start a new venture, can both learn what they need to do, learn about the legals, and then build all the legals for their venture, find investment, something we're helping on as well. So, one of the problems when it comes to legals is that you don't know what you need to do. It's a worrying area. What if I do something wrong and get sued? But actually, even though all startup ideas are different, the formula is almost identical. And we've really productized that to explain to founders what to do step by step and to empower them, and then to have a platform that builds everything, and everything can be e-signs. Everything's like completely modernized to to empower you as a founder to grow your business faster. And so I'm quite delighted that there's like an entire generation of UK startups that's basically grown up in being able to be more efficient, thanks to our platform.
Well, Anthony, thank you very much for today's chat. And clearly, there are so much more to cover. We want to talk about SeedLegals in our next part. And I do want to talk about your personal philosophies. And again, something I would love to chat further. And I look forward to have opportunity to speak to you again.
I'm looking forward to part 2. Philosophy, and I think helping founders on, should you start a startup, how to start a startup, doing user testing. I'm very much looking forward to part 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the CAT podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and will tune in again as I speak with some of the brightest minds in the startup space. If you're passionate about innovation and venture building, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep building and stay curious.